accordance with Board Procedure BP 5, this meeting will be live streamed and recorded and can be viewed on the DASD YouTube channel. So it's 6 o'clock and I'll call the meeting to order. Rebecca, was the meeting properly noticed?
Yes.
And Ann, can we have a roll call, please?
Sure. Jan Berg. Here. Brian Coker.
Here.
Sue Esser.
Here.
Jeff Hahn. Linda Lenhart.
Here.
Gussie Lewis.
Present.
Gail Lovick.
Here.
Stephanie Saar.
Here.
Megan Taylor.
Thank you. Brings us to the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That brings us to the mission, vision, and equity statement.
I see they have all sitting in front of me. The mission of the DeForest Area School District is to provide an excellent education and engage, challenge, and inspire all students to pursue their full potential. The vision statement is the DeForest Area School District is committed to a culture that honors knowledge, respects individuals, demands excellence, fosters lifelong learning, and supports relationships that strengthen individuals, families, and communities. And our equity statement is, we believe every student can learn and deserves equitable access to high quality, rigorous, and engaging learning opportunities. So we will ask questions, foster relationships, manage resources, and create systems to increase and sustain access, equity, and safety for all learners.
Thank you. That brings us to approving the agenda. Would somebody care to make that motion? Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
A second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. That brings us to an announcement by the chair. The Board of Education may convene into closed session following the regular board meeting for the purpose of deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session in accordance with Wisconsin Statute 19.85(1)(e) and 19.82(1) contract negotiations. That then brings us to item A in board business, board education on roles and responsibilities of board members with attorney Tess O'Brien-Tyson from Renning, Lewis and Lacey.
Hi, Tess. Thank you. Hello. Thank you, everybody. It is, first of all, certainly a pleasure to be here, and thank you for accommodating the schedule tonight. And my daughter just graduated, my last and final daughter just graduated from the University of Miami in Florida. And so I am in the process of moving her out. So I appreciate the flexibility in being able to talk to you from Florida, where I will say the weather is awfully nice. I'm thinking this might be a good idea for all trainings and meetings, but I'll see how long that's indulged. It is always my pleasure, and I say that honestly, to come before the board, to spend time with you, to talk with you about your roles and your responsibilities. I have such an incredible amount of admiration for individuals and school districts, certainly board members. Your tasks are hard. The issues are challenging. I know that. You're in the public eye. You need to know the law. You need to know the finances and budgets. You need to have information about your district. The tasks are really great. And so I just want you to know that I appreciate that. And I'm really honored to be trusted with your legal work and to be presenting to you tonight. So I want to start out, and I know in the past, as we've gone through a lot of these, some of these are the same things that you've heard before. And I will spend some amount of time on those. I also want to touch on the legal updates as well, because as we know, there have been lots of them that have certainly a lot of new legislation that has come forth from the legislature, and I want to hit on that as well. I also want to talk about a couple of issues that I think come up time and again for all boards, just in terms of closed sessions, confidentiality, communications, walking forums, open meetings. those are always an issue and always things individuals have questions about. So I want to spend some time there as well. The basics, just talking about the basics. Obviously, when you come in as a board member to a school district, an elected position, you come in and you take an oath of office, and it seems like a sort of a procedural thing that board members do, but it's important. It's important to know that when you become an elected official on a school board, you swear to support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Wisconsin. And you agree and you promise to impartially discharge the duties of the office to the best of your ability. And I don't go over the term impartially loosely. That's a tough task. Everybody comes to the board as a member of the community. You've got interests, you've got opinions, you have things that you want to see happen in the district. And oftentimes you are called to sit at a board table where there are a lot of different opinions, right? And you are asked to consider information, to be apprised of what the state of the law is, to know what your role is, and to discharge your role impartially. And impartially for every single child and student in your district. And that's particularly challenging, I know, when you come onto the board as a parent or you come on involved in some other matter, but you represent all of the interests in the school district and you are called upon to discharge those duties impartially. I have no doubt you do, but I do like to just stress it because certainly as we've talked about before and when I've come to you before and spoken, these are tough times. Right? There are differences of opinion that span a gap that's larger certainly than I've ever seen. And I feel like I've been doing this a long time in almost my 60 years of life. And there are really strong opinions on all sides. And I know as we've talked before, it's so important to come and listen and keep at the forefront the students that are in your district, the interests of your school district. You are also trustees, school board members, you're trustees of the school district. You have to act in the best interests of the district and never for your own personal interest. And the statutes require that. Certainly there are statutes that we'll touch on here where when you've got conflicts of interest or you've got monetary interests in things, you have duties to assess those, disclose those, and step down when you've got a conflict of interest and you can't exercise your duty impartially, or you can't exercise your duty without giving the impropriety or the appearance of impropriety. You are dealing with taxpayer money, right? You've got the public purpose doctrine. You act in the public purpose. And so as trustees, you owe an undivided duty to the public to serve in your position. And that's always important. I know that I've come before the board and we have talked about conflicts of interest. We recently talked about incompatibility of offices. Those issues come up all the time, and they are issues that you have to think about, and work through, and make sure that you can, when you are acting as a school board member, act in the best interest of the district as a whole. Along those lines, when you act in the best interest of the district, it's always important to remember you don't act as one, right? The action of the board is reflected in your minutes. And the action of the board is the action that the board takes as a majority or as a supermajority in some cases. Board members don't have the ability to speak for the board as individuals or to make decisions or act as the board. The board has to act as a whole. The president isn't authorized to exercise any authority as an individual to supervise or direct the superintendent in your district as you have your governance model. It is the board acting as decisions. You can delegate, certainly you can delegate tasks, but it's the board that acts and the board that acts with the superintendent and directs the superintendent. You have policies, your GC7 and your GC8, which dictate the conduct of the board in terms of coming to board meetings, serving in your capacity with knowledge, keeping up to date, looking at what the mission of your district and the governance structure of your district. You, more than many districts in the state of Wisconsin, you absolutely don't get into the weeds of the day-to-day operations of the district. You have a board governance, you delegate that to your superintendent, and those operations really are carried on by your superintendent and the staff and administration that she hires. You have a number of different functions as a board. You function in a quasi-legislative function, so you develop a budget, you do policy making, you do quasi-judicial functions, you handle student expulsions, non-renewal of teacher contracts, grievance procedure decisions. When we talk about impartiality, and one of the things that your district structure is really lends itself to is being the neutral arbitrator of decisions. Because you aren't part of those internal investigations, those day-to-day operations, they're really getting into the weeds of things. You sit as the neutral governance body that is called on oftentimes to make decisions about whether you're going to expel a student, whether you're going to non-renew a teacher, if you have to go through a grievance procedure. And the way that your model is set up, it lends itself to making that easier, certainly than in other districts. But at times you are called upon to be that impartial and neutral arbitrator in various quasi-judicial functions. You also have quasi-executive functions, your GC3, hiring and evaluating your district administrator, monitoring your student achievement. So you wear a lot of hats in the district, certainly. And as I said, it's a big task, right? And keeping up with all of these sort of missions and purposes and laws and regulations, it's important to always stay abreast of those. A school board, we say, certainly when we talk about it, is a creature of the statute, right? You are born of the statute, and the statute gives you your powers. So the powers that are enumerated in the statute are that you are able to do all things reasonable to promote the cause of education, including establishing, providing, and improving school district programs, functions, and activities for benefits of the pupils. You lead and you serve and act on behalf of the citizens in your district, as we talked about before. The school board officers, you've got officers of president, vice president, treasurer, and clerk, and each of those officers has a distinct role in your district. You also have governance officers. And we've talked about this, I think at the last board training, we talked quite a bit about this, that your governance officers have a unique role in your district. And those governance officers have to have a strong constitution, right? Because they are oftentimes called upon to ensure the board stays focused on those appropriate governance operations during school board meetings. So if board members go off task from the agenda items and what's been posted and put on the public notices, they go off task and begin to talk about things that aren't properly noticed under closed session. Your model states that the governance officers are supposed to speak up and bring that conversation squarely back to those agenda items. The governance officers are to help with agenda planning, to mentor new and existing board members. You may have one or two, and they may share those duties. Identify activities, professional development, educate board members on coherent governance, guide the board in policy review. Nobody likes to do policy review, right? It's a task that I think everybody sort of, this collective sigh when policy making, it has to happen at any level, but certainly an important part of that role. Participate in agenda planning to ensure that student results are the board's focus. And then you can see the others in there, but certainly they are what I consider as sort of your compliance officers, right? They are tasked with ensuring that you've gotten professional development, if there's new development to be had, that you've got an agenda that is focused on the things that the board focuses on, that you stay on those agenda items, and that you remain in compliance. And so again, those are unique positions in districts, and I think it's important to have somebody in that position that knows the compliance requirements and rules and really can speak up and talk about those. You have board committees. The GC5 states that you can create committees if they're deemed helpful to the board in the performance of your responsibilities. Committees, again, committees don't take the place of board action. They don't direct, advise, assist, or oversee staff. They don't speak or act on behalf of the board, but they are tasked oftentimes with doing kind of that work at the grassroots, that beginning work to bring up to the board for the board to have an efficient and a productive discussion out of the committee. The district administrator. In your district with your governance model, the district administrator is the board's single point of connection to the district. The only point of connection with the operations of the district is your superintendent, and you direct the operations of the district through that superintendent. Rebecca, Dr. Teets is a big job. And that is a big job to oversee all of the operations and charged with overseeing all of that and being the one point and the one liaison to the board. She's charged with the administration of the board policies. So when you talk about your policies, you've got a set of policies that direct the board, and then there's a set of policies that direct the operations in the district. She is charged with administering those, with reviewing those, with determining if additional policies are required. In terms of the board, certainly in your model, and I represent a number of school districts across the state, and boards, it is amazing how different boards interact with staff, with administration, and sort of the governance model. Again, your model, it does lend itself to a little bit easier, and it mitigates the possibility that you are going to get mired in the day-to-day operations of the district. I see that at times. Community members will call a board member and ask them to sit in on their student's IEP meeting. Or community members will call board members and ask what's going on with a particular student or staff member that they've heard that's happening. And the board member will call superintendent and dictate that an investigation begin or things occur. Your model really places all of that squarely in the hands of your superintendent and the administration and the staff in the district. And so all of those day-to-day operations, those functions that are required, investigations, discipline, administrative policy making, all of those things are squarely in the hands of your administration. And that's how your board has set it up. That's the model that they have created. In terms of when you talk about you as a board and your actions that you take as a board, two of the most important things to keep in mind and to always keep at the forefront are the open meetings law and the public records law. So Wisconsin has open governance model, right? The statutes have a default to open governance and transparency among elected officials. So when we talk about the open meetings law, when you think about a meeting, the open meetings law defines meeting pretty broadly. And the Showers test, which is a test that came out of the Wisconsin Supreme Court, essentially has two pieces of it that we look at when we talk about, is a gathering of board members, is that an actual meeting under the open meetings law? And why does it matter? Because if it's a meeting, you've got to post that for the public and let them know, give them notice ahead of time that you're going to be having a meeting and what you're going to be talking about and whether you're going to be taking any action. So two ways to tell. The first is there a purpose to engage in government business? That's the purpose requirement. And the second requirement is what is referred to informally as the numbers requirement. And that there have to be a number of members present sufficient to determine your board's course of action regarding whatever it is that you're proposing to be discussed. So if you've got a gathering of 1/2 or more of your body's membership, it is rebuttably presumed to be a meeting. So when you go to the state convention, and you may go and people travel in a car, you may go and have members at the state convention, you post a notice saying, we anticipate that there may be a quorum of board members in this particular location or in this particular meeting. The board is not posting this as a meeting because they do not intend to take any action or conduct any official board business. Certainly there are times at retreats, at again, state conventions, at other times when the board is together, but because there is a presumption when you've got 1/2 or more of your board members together that it is a meeting, you post in advance and let the public know that you may have a quorum of board members present, but you don't intend to take any action or discuss any district business. There's a recent case that just came out of the Court of Appeals that talked about a negative quorum. And a negative quorum, and it's an unpublished decision, but gives some instruction about this. A negative quorum is when you've got enough board members together that they aren't a quorum to enact business, but there are enough board members together to block business. And so just like a forum of board members who can come together to talk about and potentially affect the board's business, when you've got enough to come together that potentially can block the board's business, that's considered a negative quorum and can also be a violation of the open meetings law. What the Great Lakes case that's cited in here, what that case essentially stated is that there has to be at least a negative quorum to constitute a meeting. So if you've got 9 members on your board and it is a majority vote and you have 2 members who are on a committee, it's not enough to constitute a negative quorum, and it isn't if those 2 members on the committee or if those 2 members on meet to talk about something with the district administrator, it will not be presumed to be a meeting of the board, because at least it's not enough to be a negative quorum. When you talk about board members and you talk about a meeting, we don't talk about just when you're all gathered in one room. You can have communications between a quorum of school board members through technology that may be considered a meeting because you are gathering those members, you're communicating to do official board business. I know that I give this sort of warning or caution all the time. And what I say, and I'm certain that I know Anne is great at this, and I know that to the point to say, do not reply all. When she says, I mean, Anne's been doing this a long time, and boy, does she know her stuff. When she sends out notices or communications to the board and says, don't reply all. Because the open meetings law, right, also takes into account that there are times when individuals try to circumvent the open meetings law. They may not gather as a board, but somebody puts out a note about a topic and board members reply all, and now there is communication about official board business between board members, and that communication can affect the board's business. So they call walking quorums occur when you've got board members that are engaged in a series of communications with each other. You also can send something out and say, okay, just respond to the president of the board. Then the president of the board gets what your response is and then contacts the next board member and tells them what your response is and asks for their response. So when you think about what those communications are, if whatever your communications are that aren't taking place at a public board meeting, you always have to be mindful of a walking quorum. The actions that the board takes, communications about district business between board members, things that can affect a board's actions and votes, has to be done at a properly noticed meeting under the open meetings law. There are also times when communications between board members may in fact not be a violation of the open meetings law, but give that perception of impropriety. And I want to talk about that just for a minute, because I think we are seeing more and more when we have phones, right? When we've got cell phones, when we've got individuals on computers, and you are conducting official board business. You can't be having communications with other board members via text message during meetings. You can't be having communications where you're sending out emails and board members are communicating during board meetings on emails. You may not be doing that. I will say I have no doubt that any of you sitting at this table tonight don't do that. But I think one of the things you think about is the perception that the public has when individuals are texting during board meetings and they are board members, when they're emailing, and the potential that there is a perception that board members are having communications either between each other or sometimes even in closed sessions. What I see are board members texting or on their emails or on their computers, and boy, I get really nervous about that. And so I always caution, be very careful about engaging in any sort of electronic communication while you are acting as a board member in your official capacity and conducting board business. And we'll talk about closed sessions in just a minute too. When you talk about the open meetings and electronic communications or phone calls, the courts, when they look at, did this violate the open meetings law? They look at how many participants were involved in the communications. How many communications were there regarding the subject? What are the time frames in which those electronic communications occurred? And what, to the extent of sort of that conversation-like interactions, are included in those electronic communications going back and forth? Those are kind of the things that courts look at when they determine, was there really an intent to conduct board business outside of an open meeting? The consequences, and there are consequences for violating open meetings laws. It can, first and foremost, in terms of district business, it can result in the voiding of actions taken at a meeting upon an action by the Attorney General. So if action is taken and the action is taken at a meeting that's not properly noticed or is in violation of the open meetings law, those actions can be voided by the Attorney General. In addition, board members who knowingly violate the open meetings laws, there are forfeitures. You can forfeit between $25 and $300 for each violation. And districts cannot reimburse the member for the fines. Although in that situation, the district can provide a defense. So if the district has to lodge a defense and defend board members and against an open meetings law violation lawsuit or complaint, they can do so, but they can't pay the fines. So if you're determined to have violated, those are individual fines that run to the elected official. One of the other important things to keep in mind as a board member are public records. People ask me all the time, is this a public record? And I always say, any record that you create in your role as an official board member and you maintain is a public record. It doesn't necessarily mean that ultimately, as we walk through the assessment of the public record, if somebody makes a request, that in the end it will have to be disclosed. But you start with the premise that a record that is maintained by a board member and pertains to official district business or district business, you start with the premise that it's a public record. And when we get requests for public records, emails between board members, text messages, notes that are kept, documents that are kept by individuals or in the district, there's a whole series of questions and kind of an analysis that we walk through under the public records law. We say, okay, first of all, do the records that somebody is requesting, do they exist? That means oftentimes trying to locate records, it's a tough task sometimes. And that sometimes means going to board members and saying, do you have any notes on this? Have you kept any documentation? Do you have information on your phones, your personal emails? At the end of the day, the record, the substance of the record is what's important. It doesn't matter where it's kept. So if the record pertains to district business, it can be kept in your personal email. It can be kept in the drawer of your desk at home. It can be kept in the office, the district office, on your phone, on your computer. If it pertains to district business, it is and maintained by you in your capacity as a board member. It's potentially a public record that we have to look at and determine if it has to be disclosed. So does the record exist? Is there any basis under the law that says we can't disclose it? Right? There are lots of them. Confidential student records, you can't disclose. Personal employment personal information about employees, you can't disclose. There are a whole host of other things, and we walk through that statute to determine it. And we also look at, are there laws in place that require us to disclose it? And then we say, okay, if we get through all of those now with this record, and the balancing test is the public's interest in getting the record, does that outweigh the district's interest in keeping it from disclosure? So it is a process that we walk through, but certainly you start with the premise that that record is potentially a public record that's subject to disclosure. One of the things I think that oftentimes is misunderstood is that if you have a community member who writes to you about their student, and they write to you and they include 10 other people on the email, they include other board members, they include people over at DPI. They include their next door neighbor or the head of some committee wherever. The fact that they have disclosed information about their child does not mean that you can reply all, right? It doesn't make a difference if a parent or an employee or whomever it is discloses their personal information. Your responsibilities and roles are still your responsibilities and roles to keep information confidential. And so always keep that in mind as well when you're talking about confidentiality of records. We'll talk a little bit more about that too. I like to say when I talk about public records is, and I say it to staff certainly when I do training, is and say it to the board as well and administration, that if you don't want to see a communication up on an electronic screen in a courtroom or a hearing room with an ALJ, don't write it, right? Don't put it in writing. And boy, I'll tell you, I underscore that over and over and over with clients, because I'm the one who's often tasked with sifting through communications. And I think, ooh, this just isn't going to be great, right? And so keep that in mind. And it's easy to sort of shoot off an email or shoot off a text. But oftentimes maybe take a day and think about it and go back to it and determine if it's really something that you want to put in writing. A purely personal message, you send a message, right, by happenstance on your board email address to your child and say, I'll pick you up at 4 o'clock. That's not official district business. It's not going to be subject to the public records law. So purely personal messages are not public records. But messages that contain any material that's relevant to the governmental functions and responsibilities are public records. You not only have an obligation potentially to disclose them, you have an obligation to also retain them and not destroy them. If you are a blogger, your personal blog entry can be a record. Your Facebook, right? There's a Facebook group can be a public record if you discuss matters within board authority, even if it's set to private or to friends only. I will say this, do not post on social media with regard to district business if you are a board member. You have the right to speak as a citizen. You don't drop your First Amendment rights at the door when you become a board member. But that line is so blurred when if you've got a personal Facebook account and you are posting about official district business, particularly business that you may be tasked to take action on, to consider, to be an impartial arbitrator with regard to, it becomes really hard then to make the distinction between are you speaking as a private citizen and are you speaking as a board member? And there is when we get down to the social media part of this, there's a decision that came out that we'll talk a little bit about. I know I've spoken about it before. That's right down on sub E of the outline. Before we get there, and I don't know why I didn't put the social media before the public participation, but public participation, it surprises a lot of people to know it's not required. You are not required as a board to open up your meeting to the public and allow them to speak to you. You are required to open up your meeting so that they can watch your deliberations and watch the actions that you take and have access to your meeting, but you are not required to allow the public to speak at your meetings. I don't know that of a board that does not allow it. Obviously, you're part of a community. You want the input from the public, but certainly it isn't something that is required under the open meetings law. Okay, let's talk again then about social media. So there's the Linkey versus Freed case. That was a U.S. Supreme Court case that came out in 2024. And the issue that came up in that case is a board member of wasn't a school board, but had talked about official government business on their social media account. And when individuals started writing in about it, they started blocking them and deleting their messages. And you can't do that, right? Because if you're talking in your capacity as a board member and there is a perception that you have the authority to speak on it, then you may violate others' rights to be able to speak on that topic as well. So the U.S. Supreme Court said, when you're talking as a public official, you are talking on behalf of the government if you possess both an actual authority to speak on a particular matter, and you purport to exercise that authority when you are speaking in relevant social media posts. That gets dicey, right? When you are talking on social media, particularly, I've watched it in other districts where someone will post something and then another board member will comment on it, members of the public, and it gets to be somewhat of a heated discussion online. If you are going to post on social media and you've got a personal account, you're going to be talking about board business or district business, I would advise you to clarify on each and every single post that you are communicating as an individual, as a community member, as a parent, and you are not speaking in your capacity as a board member. More than that, I would just advise you not to post about official district business on your social media account. I think it really, ultimately, I think it can undermine administration. I think it can lead to discussions that you don't want to have in the community with community members. And I think it really just poses a lot of risks. So my advice is don't post on social media as a board member, but if you are going to, I would advise you to clarify in each and every post that you're speaking as a citizen, as a community member, or as a parent. Confidentiality, boy, you get a lot of information as a board member, and you are entrusted with that information to keep it confidential. And that applies to student records, in personally identifiable information about students, personal information and employment information about staff, information about individuals that can harm the reputation of those individuals. When you are talking about matters, or when you are considering, deliberating, making decisions about things, you get a lot of information as board members, and it's important to recognize that you've got confidentiality requirements in a number of different areas of the law. Disclosure of confidentiality can result in prosecution, misconduct in office. It can be up to a felony. If you commit a criminal act, or the district doesn't have to defend you. There's also a privacy statute, which gives individuals a right to bring a claim for a violation of privacy. And I oftentimes, when I say these things, I see board members, and I can't see your faces now, but I do know that individuals I know that people think, well, what would we be disclosing? Obviously, we're not going to be disclosing those things, but boy, when you talk to neighbors and they're talking about an issue that's going on at school, or you're having communications with another board member as you're standing in a parking lot, or you are talking to the superintendent about something and others can potentially hear around you. Keep in mind that those discussions about confidential information need to be kept confidential. That information needs to be kept confidential. When you go into closed session, right, we talked about tonight where Gail read and notified that the board may be going into closed session to discuss and consider things. When you go into closed session, you always have to remember that you've got to start an open session. As Gail did, the presiding officer has to announce it, has to announce the basis for the closed session under the statute. You have to take there has to be a motion. There's got to be a roll call, a motion second, a roll call vote. There has to be a majority vote to go into the closed session. There was a case that came out of the Court of Appeals last year where they were talking about bargaining and negotiating, and the board member didn't feel like they had enough opportunity to have a discussion about the basis for closed session. They didn't have enough opportunity to put their point forward that they didn't think this was proper closed session. And so in that case, the court said there may be circumstances where you actually have to allow board members to have a motion, a second, and then a discussion about whether or not this is a proper matter for a closed session, particularly when you're talking about bargaining and negotiating. When you go into closed session, and I know it's tough sometimes because discussions sometimes can encompass a lot of things. When you go into closed session, your discussions, your voting, right? It has to be only with regard to the topics that you have notified the public that you're going to be talking about. So your discussions in closed session need to stay to those agenda items that you went into closed session for. And that's where your governance board member comes into play, right? If you start going off into discussions that go beyond what's on the agenda, that's when the governance member should step up and say, this is going beyond what's posted. We need to come back and focus on what the reason that we've gone into closed session. Voting in closed session doesn't happen often. It can, the statutes allow you to vote in closed session if voting in open session, once you come back out, would compromise the purpose of the closed. So if you are going into closed session to handle an expulsion, you're not going to come out into open and say, we are expelling so-and-so, made that decision. Or if you go into closed session to talk about negotiations for the purchase of property, for example, and you authorize the district administrator to make an offer at a certain amount, or that you'd only go to a certain amount, or whatever it is that you may be discussing or authorizing, those votes may be properly done in closed session. Keep in mind, if you're going to take a vote in closed session, it has to be noticed on the agenda. So your agenda has to say, we're going into closed session to discuss and consider these things, and the board may take action on the matters discussed in closed session while still in closed session. So that has to be included on your notice. In addition, if you plan to come out of closed session and take action in open session, your agenda has to state that. So you've got to state that the board may reconvene in open session to take action on matters in closed session. So you've got to make sure, and I say this knowing full well, again, that Anne knows all of these rules backwards and forwards, so I don't worry about DeForest. Certainly good things to always keep in the forefront. When you're talking about the confidentiality of closed sessions, the reason you go into closed sessions is that you can have discussions that are candid discussions with board members. And it's sort of it's a sacred place, right? In closed sessions where you're having these discussions. And it's important, really important, to keep in mind that the discussions that you have in closed session are meant to stay in closed sessions. You don't have the right to record closed sessions. You don't have the right to tell people what happened in closed sessions. The information that comes and is shared in closed sessions, those deliberations, those discussions are meant to stay confidential until the board makes a determination that they are no longer confidential. One thing I do want to note is that things can happen in closed session and that are kept confidential, but certainly if there is a lawsuit, the board gets involved in a lawsuit where the board is a party to the lawsuit. The law does allow in discovery litigants and parties to ask about what the board talked about in closed session, information about closed sessions. So closed sessions aren't kept off from discovery, although we fight it. But in discussions that happen in closed session, certainly there may be possibilities that they are not kept confidential if you ultimately get engaged in litigation. Obviously, number 6 and 7 on here, when you talk about closed session, it really does undermine the board's trust and board member willingness to discuss items. So it's really important to keep the closed session closed. As I had talked about before, I get nervous when I see individuals texting in closed session. And I think for a number of different reasons. I think it just the appearance of it. I think sometimes it can chill discussion if other board members believe that you're texting somebody outside of that closed session and providing information. And so I also would be very, very careful about that. And when I see that in a meeting, I just oftentimes will remind board members, and I'll say, wait, you know, I would advise that you don't text while the board is in the middle of a closed session. Consequences for failure to follow board policies. There's misconduct in office. When you perform an act knowing it's in excess of your authority or it's forbidden by law, there are criminal consequences, there are monetary consequences. There's censure, right? There is a board, if a board believes a board member is acting outside the scope of their duties, not in the best interest of the district, Certainly, they can bring what's called a public censure. It's a parliamentary procedure, essentially, where the board formally announces to the public, we are reprimanding one of our members. Individuals are elected officials. And I sometimes will get a complaint that says, you need to kick that person off the board. And I always say, they're an elected official. We don't have that authority. No board member has authority to kick another board member off as an elected official. The public can do a recall. There can be a removal from a judge for cause. But board members, you talk about what's the board's recourse for a board member that is acting either outside the scope of their duties or improperly, are various steps. You can create small committees to make decisions that don't include that board member. You can take those board members off of, take them off of the executive committee or don't allow them to be officers. But you can't take them off of the board. So your recourse really is to just publicly reprimand them and let the public know that you don't agree with what they're doing. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the legal updates. Boy, there's a lot going on in the legislature. I'm sure you've seen certainly that Governor Evers and the legislature came to an agreement on the surplus funds, and that included some amount of a tax rebate. It included some amount to general aid, and then it included, I think it was, I can't remember exactly, 300 million or some large amount for special education. So certainly that was big news today as that comes down the pipe. But there's a lot that's come out of the legislature. There's a lot of decisions that are important, and I'm sure I'm not hitting all of them, but I wanted to talk about ones that I know are big discussions. One of them being the state of Wisconsin versus KRC. It was a case, a Supreme Court case, where a 12-year-old was questioned by school officials and SROs. And that's always, right, we talk about that, and the DOJ has a safety manual that they talk about. When do you step over the line? And when does an interview of a student become a custodial interrogation? Such that you'd have to issue the police officer or the SRO would have to give somebody their Miranda rights in order to preserve that evidence. And in this case, the 12-year-old, the court decided, was under custodial interrogation for purposes of the Miranda when he made statements to law enforcement at school. And his statements should have been excluded from his criminal trial. In that case, it was an interesting situation, but I think ultimately the prevailing thought was that the police officer stood by the door in that last interview of the student. So the student was potentially the individual that engaged in criminal conduct, and the police officer stood by that door, and the student believed that they didn't have a right to leave. But there are situations where, I know in Title IX, and we talk about police officers come in, or your SRO sits in and does an interview of a student with the Title IX coordinator or with the investigator. Sometimes, and depending upon the age of students, students may feel that they don't have the right to leave. So there's always that kind of gray area. And so be aware of that in terms of SROs. And in terms of investigations. And I think I'll just say I've worked with Ms. Cabbage a lot in terms of investigation that she's done, and certainly she's always mindful of that, and it's kind of walking through the investigations and who's conducting them and when are you conducting them, and things like that. Certainly, I think that gave a chill to everybody when that case came out. Another important thing that came out is ADA accessibility. There was going to be a requirement that your websites, things in terms of your streaming, had to comply with the ADA accessibility rules. That date has been pushed back. The date's been pushed back, so for entities of population of 50,000 or more, it's been extended to April of 2027. And less than 50,000 extended to April of 2028. That can be a big task. Let's just say that when you think about your district website and making it, there's WCAG, it's called the WAG standards. Those WAG standards can require closed captioning. They can require things so that screen readers can read documents, can describe the pictures. There are requirements for individuals who are visually impaired to be able to turn contrast down on screens. There may be voice to text requirements. So those are big tasks. And it's interesting, that was a huge issue about 10 years ago with the Office for Civil Rights, where individuals were filing complaints and people were scrambling to make all of their district websites and links and everything accessible. And that slowed when the Office for Civil Rights said, there's no way in the world we could monitor this and keep up with all of these. So they sort of went by the wayside. But those ADA compliance requirements then came back up, and I think you're realizing that they're pretty big requirements. So they have extended the timeline for making sure that your district is in compliance. So I'm guessing that your IT are well aware of that and are working on that and making sure you're in compliance. 2025 Act 42, another big one, prohibiting the use of wireless communication devices during instructional time. It requires school boards to adopt a policy that prohibits students from using the personal wireless communication, so from using their cell phone devices and other things during instructional time. You've got to have a policy by July 1 of this year, and by October of this year, you have to submit your policy. And then every year thereafter, October of 2027, and every October 1, you have to notify if changes were made the prior school year to your policy. Act 57 is the parental notification of alleged sexual misconduct by a school staff member. It requires school districts, charter schools, private schools to notify the parent or guardian if they receive a credible report of alleged sexual misconduct by a school staff member. The notification has to be provided by the end of the day on which the credible report is received and applies to pupils alleged to be victims, targets, or recipients of alleged sexual misconduct. To satisfy it, you have to provide the notice in person or by phone, including a voicemail. If you get a report on a school day after the end of your scheduled instruction, you have to notify the parent by the next school day. And then the act goes into more detail than what I've provided in here, but it does specify those conditions under which a report is considered received by a school. So certainly a big requirement. Act 89, policies on appropriate communications with pupils. It requires school boards and the governing body of each independent school and private school to adopt a policy on appropriate communication between employees or volunteers and students by September of 2026. It has to apply to communications that occur during or outside of school hours and include standards for appropriate content and methods of communication. Also, that policy has to include consequences for policy violations. And I'll say, this is an issue that comes up over and over and over. Right? And it comes up more than I would like it to, certainly. And I spend a fair amount of my time involved in investigations where staff members are having communications with students that are arguably not appropriate, or are at times of the day that are not appropriate, or not squarely focused on the district business or what's happening with regard to the student at school or in school or pertaining to school business. And I've been a big proponent, even though I know it's challenging, of giving pretty strict parameters to staff to say, here are the platforms the district has vetted for you to communicate with students on, platforms that the district has the ability to see what's being communicated. And that's not just for the students' safety, but for staff. And it's really hard to dig your way out when you've got communications after communications after communication with a student. You sort of presume that those are not proper, and then staff have to be able to show that they are. And it's just a situation no one wants to be in. So as much as all of these various laws are more requirements and can be tedious, I think the basis for them is really a good basis and something that both keeps in mind staff members' interests and students' interests. The Act also requires DPI to develop training in identifying, preventing, and reporting grooming and professional boundary violations and make it available to schools free of charge. You've got to provide training to your employees in identifying, preventing, and reporting grooming and professional boundary violations. Again, really, really good requirements in terms of talking about this, providing training, giving examples, making things clear. It's a hard time to be a staff member in districts, right? It's hard to be a teacher, and individuals who care a lot about students. Boy, they get, people get into education because they want to make a connection with their students. And sometimes making that connection is having communications and listening to them and sort of being their mentor and walking by their side. And it's tough. It's tough to kind of make those kind of discern when something moves into a category that is just a improper, or at least gives the appearance of impropriety. So I will be interested when we see that training and what comes out, and how DPI identifies grooming. There's not a perfect definition, right? It includes a lot of different factors, and it certainly includes some discretion in looking at all of those things and making that determination. But I'm hopeful that there'll be some clarity with it. The 2025, the Act 88, creating a crime of grooming a child, it is now a crime of grooming a child, and it is a new crime in state statute, punishable by felony, specific to grooming a child for sexual activity. And it prohibits any person from engaging in a course of conduct, a pattern of behavior, a series of acts with the intention to condition, seduce, solicit, lure, or entice a child to engage in sexual intercourse or contact, produce, distribute, or possess depictions of the child engaged in explicit conduct. Keep in mind that you don't have to prove that this course of conduct was for the purpose of conditioning, seducing, soliciting, or luring. It allows you to look at a series of conduct and say, boy, all of these things, a staff member has given gifts. They have been alone. They've given personal rides. They've violated policies that require professional boundaries. And when you look at all of those things together, it allows you to make a determination that the acts, when they are all put together, indicate that it is likely they are for the purpose of grooming. I have been involved in a number of different cases now, more than one, where police have said, we aren't going to charge for this behavior because, or the staff member's conduct, but right now, because the statute hadn't yet gone into effect, but had it been in effect, we certainly would have. So I think we've already seen at least one case where the staff member has been charged, and I think we are going to see more. I did include a link for you in here, or at least just thinking you're printing these out, but Anne has as well. But the DPI has a great document with all of the new legislation, and gives links to it and gives information regarding it. So, so I did want to just hit on all of those and bring your attention to that. Happy to take any questions, but on any particular issues, but that's what I've got.
Do you have any questions for Tess or clarifications needed? It's a lot of information.
I know, it's a lot of information all at once, and I'm sorry. I was
No.
going to try to keep it to 30 minutes or 45 minutes, as I told Anne, but once we start getting into all of it, I never let a lawyer speak and go on.
If there's no questions, we can certainly let Tess go.
Okay, have a good night, everybody, and thank you very much again.
Thank you, Pat.
All right, that brings us to item B, presentation and possible approval of board policy OE10 learning environment.
We can.
Yay.
All right, I'm going to start with the learning environment, OE10. Oh, I need to navigate.
Yeah, here, I'll hand it to you. I got it.
All right, so
It's okay. We're gonna figure this out.
I'm navigating it. All right. So OA10 learning environment in the sort of the next one. So some of the things that are strengths in the board report is we did overall with iconic absenteeism, we are below the state average. And we also increased our participation on the student engagement survey from the previous year. Opportunities to grow are still looking at the chronic absenteeism while our overall is below the state average, continuing to look at the subgroups. And additionally, looking at some of the subgroups for disproportionality when it comes to suspension data. We did have overall 12 indicators on the report that were above the benchmark, 6 that were below, the total of 18 indicators. This chart outlines all of them. I can go through and read them for you. Sorry, you do it. I don't know why I'm trying to. All right, there's a lot of different data that we pull in for this report. So yeah, as you can see, suspension, expulsion, student engagement participation. We have the PBIS walkthrough tool. There's reports from HR, student handbook, Skyward, a lot. So there's a lot of different data points in this report. All right, so moving on to thinking about action plans that we had put into last year's board report and where we are now with them.
And so as Kate mentioned, we've done a lot of work around our attendance. And so there was a focus on providing proactive communication to our families and having them understand like the comparison of where their learner might be in comparison to their peers, like within their school, within the district, and within the state. And so we've been able to push those out. We've really utilized Parent Square this year to be able to get kind of like that back and forth to better understand with families. You know, if we are communicating that they're absent or if they are tardy, being able to either hear from families like right away, if like, yep, they had an appointment or things like that. So just being able to keep that proactive communication going.
With the student engagement survey, we really worked hard this year to try to increase participation. One of the strategic action steps we took using our new administrative assistant in the instructional services department was to work really closely with building administration and building staff to help identify which students hadn't taken it yet and come up with actions on how they could still do it. If Flex wasn't working or advisory wasn't working, what are other ways that we can get to those students to make sure that they were able to participate? So you will see we made a noticeable jump, specifically at the middle school. We went from 83 to 95% participation rate. In high school, I think jumped up 2 or 3% as well. So that's something we're going to continue to do and continue to find different ways to engage with students so that they can complete the survey. So the data is more accurate. In terms of extracurriculars, we talked last year about how we're going to identify barriers and really look for different ways to engage maybe our underrepresented groups. And so there are 3 examples on the board of different extracurriculars that we started this year. Adaptive Sports League started last year, but Adaptive Sports League, Best Buddies, and the Disabled Student Union are 3 examples that we're able to put in place and get our kids more involved with.
Anna, can you describe Best Buddies a little bit?
Yes, it partners students with disabilities with general education peers and to just provide and kind of like explore opportunities for like just general high school activities that maybe students with disabilities might not be able to participate in, you know, on their own. And so just opportunities for that kind of really focused and supported interaction that it's kind of starts at the Best Buddies like club meetings, but then it happens everywhere, like at basketball games. But it starts to build that relationship really kind of meaningfully. And so they've done a lot of really fun things this year.
What about the Disabled Student Union? What is that about?
Yeah, I actually had an opportunity to meet with them. Right now, they're really focused on some advocacy and they're working on building some professional development for teaching staff. I think that's their goal, is to be able to provide doing some of that advocacy to the high school staff about how we can improve and how we can better meet the needs of our students with disabilities.
So this is all high school.
Yeah, all high school. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so our next set of slides are focusing on our areas of improvement, the indicators that we didn't quite meet the benchmark. And you will notice some overlap in action plans on these because some of these do overlap. So I just want to name that up front. First one I sort of talked about already, the student engagement survey, especially looking at our students in all subgroups and really trying to be strategic and intentional about how we're following up with students and how we're meeting students where they're at in order to complete the survey. So really working with our administrators, working with our teachers who see these students every day and trying to find the best way to support them through that process of completing the survey. The next part is at least students who participate in at least one activity. We did see an increase from last year to this year, up a couple percentage points. And some of that's due to the increased extracurriculars and co-curriculars we're able to offer students. But also one action step that we want to continue to be really mindful of is having conversations with students, whether it's during flex, the student superintendent student council that we meet with, and really find ways to make sure that we are meeting the needs of students, that we're understanding what are the things that they really want to see that would get them involved. We do a survey every year called the Career and Technical Education Survey. And one of the questions we ask students are, what are some activities or things that you would be involved with if we had them as an offering? So we take all that information and then we work with our staff to really see if someone's willing to lead that out, what that looks like, what the commitment is, and really try to offer as much programming to students as we possibly can. The next one's very similar, looking at our subgroups. And so this is where we can be really intentional about putting focus groups together of students to make sure that we are meeting our needs. And I think the examples we shared earlier is a good start. However, there's always opportunities for us to grow and find new ways for students to get involved as well.
Right, the next one is regarding our parents. We want 100% of parents signing and guardians signing an agreement that they read the handbook when they registered. And so while we have increased from last year and we're very close to that 100% benchmark, we have not met it. We are hopeful as we move to Infinite Campus, all families are going to re-engage with registration on a different level because of the switch. So there'll be a lot of support for that. So that will also help us grow in this area.
This next area is really focused on our student groups within our attendance data. And so we continue to partner with our families that are, are part of these student groups and helping to identify those individual needs or maybe a disability related need that might be associated or, kind of leading to that chronic absenteeism. Like I said, all of those individual conversations and those attendance meetings that we've been having at all the levels, we've been able to really develop some creative solutions, like some unique transportation opportunities. So we're just really hearing and partnering with our families to try to improve those attendance. Specifically looking at our suspension data and our disproportionality across our student groups. We continue to work with our administration and our staff about what are those alternatives to suspension. And so are there more restorative options or more targeted learning opportunities? In addition, we're using some of our monthly learning opportunities that we have with our case managers to really focus on those behavioral intervention plans and developing programming so we can maybe prevent incidences that might lead to removals, specifically for our students with disabilities, knowing that's one of our most disproportionate subgroups.
So next, we're going to talk about our additional steps, so things that we want to work on moving forward and how that helps with this report. The first one is we've made a lot of gains over the last couple of years with our extracurricular activities, with Emily Hendricks taking on that role within the ACP coordinator. We really worked hard to streamline processes and put things in place to help make sure that our groups are supported and they're also following certain processes and guidelines. So one of the things that we want to look at next year is that idea of code of conduct for our activity groups. And really leaning into other districts to make sure that we have something in place that's very firm and also very supportive of our groups.
I just kind of mentioned that we are continuing to look at those alternatives to suspensions, but one of the things that we're going to be implementing next year are our social emotional learning curriculum, 7 Mindsets at the middle school. They developed a new kind of pathway on that curriculum tool, and it's called Seven Wellness or Seven Mindsets Wellness. And so they have like targeted learning that's being provided, and they have lots of different topics like around bullying or cyberbullying, vaping, anger, depression, healthy relationships. And so like being able to use that rather than have a removal, potentially be able to build that into some of the learning that we could provide for students to then hopefully shape behavior moving forward.
The last one we highlighted is reviewing the student engagement survey. Every year, we always look at the questions, and I know we've talked a lot at the board table about the alignment of those questions with the indicator. We want to spend some time doing some deeper work this next year, leaning into our leaders and our students and our staff to really help understand if those questions are meeting the mark, and if any adjustments need to be made to make sure that we are hitting those indicators, not only as on our board report, but getting us the information for our schools to make sure that we're able to best support students as well.
So the next part is our potential indicator revisions. And so the first one on there is what I had already brought to you all at when we went through R4 is to remove the attendance, knowing that that really feels like a result. So removing it from OE 10 and moving it to R4.
Okay, the next one is looking at, yes. So for indicators 10.1 indicator 1 and 10.1 indicator 2, that is the student engagement participation. If you notice, we gave you the participation rates at the elementary school for 2nd and 3rd grade. As we've referenced in previous board reports, we now use SABRES and MySABRES at the elementary level for students to reflect on their social emotional learning. And so at kindergarten and 1st grade, only SABRES. And SABRES is when the teacher does a self-assessment of the students do not actually do a self-assessment. So it's not actually, the teacher does an assessment, a review of the student, not self-assessment. But in 2nd grade is when students start to do self-assessment as well. So we gave you the participation rates for 2nd and 3rd grade in that self-assessment that they take, which is MySABRES. It's kind of a tongue twister. So therefore, wanting to essentially just remove the kindergarten and 1st grade levels from this indicator, since that at this point is being done through SABRES, which is what the teachers do.
The final indicator revision that we wanted to bring forward is looking at our participation in extracurriculars, adjusting it from 90% to 80%. Part of the rationale from that, when we think about back to the learning we've done around PBIS and just that idea of tier 1, they say 80% is makes for a really healthy tier 1, and that additional tier 2, 15%, tier 3, 5% is really digging in to figure out what are the barriers that are not allowing students to participate. So if we feel like we're sitting at 80%, we have a healthy tier 1, and then it's really leaning into students to figure out what are those challenges or barriers that are causing them not to participate. And something that I learned this year sitting in a lot of ACP presentations is our students are also involved in a lot of things outside of school. And just because we aren't measuring that because it's not in our system, students are also very involved in other things too. So there's a lot of different reasons why they may or may not be involved. We feel like 80% sort of hits that mark of like we're maintaining a healthy percentage moving forward.
That's a relatively new indicator. And when we literally pulled the first percentage out of the sky, because at the time we weren't keeping track in Skyward consistently of all of the groups. So that is something that we knew we might need to change that benchmark. So for that reason, we find this report in compliance with exception. We've made some growth, but we still have areas that are a key focus.
Okay, thank you.
Make a motion to accept the report.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, we now own the report. We can ask questions. No question. Yeah,
But I'll let people.
no, go. It's like people are still processing. You're ready. For
10.2
Could you give me a better understanding of the 5%? Within 5% of the population? Like, so should that number be higher or lower? Like, so the student population is this, the percentage of crowd absenteeism is. You just explain in detail what that 5% means. Is it 5% of the 7%?
Yeah, no, so. Okay, so if we're looking for like a representative population that are experiencing kind of whatever we're looking at. So here is, we're looking at chronic absenteeism. So let's look at that first kind of line there, 2 or more races. So students who identify as 2 or more races make up 6.35% of DeForest's population. And so the percentages of the bucket of students that are chronically absent, we'd want it to be within 5% of the 6.5%.
Ideally, we want it to be lower.
Exactly. So like, let's go to one of the ones where we are disproportionate, where we're red. So it says like Hispanic, our students who are Hispanic, they make up 7.75% of our student body.
Okay.
So that's the bucket of our student body. But now if we look at just the bucket of our students that are chronically absent, they make up 13.68% of that bucket.
Okay, I was thinking of it's a different. Okay.
And so we are, so that 5% is kind of what our state indicates is disproportionate. And so if we wanted everything, we would want it to be lower in this situation. In other situations, we want it to be higher, like more in law day. That's something else that we look at disproportionality, things like that. Here, they're more representative in our bucket of students that are chronically absent.
So in 10.3 indicator 1, that's same
Yes.
Exactly.
system is for
Mhm.
this as well.
Yes.
It would have been nice to hear more because we have 2, the indicator 10.2 and indicator 10.3. It would have been nice to hear more detail and plan on those because they're not compliant. And you presented a report of compliant with exception. And I don't see where the exception is in this. These 2. I'm thinking compliance with exception. Our school flooded that day and we couldn't get students in, which dropped our attendance rate. I would say that's compliant with exception. There is an exceptional circumstance. But I didn't see, or I didn't hear, maybe I wasn't given.
I could be wrong, but they state them as not in compliance, but when you look at OE10 as a whole, those represent 2 out of 8 chunks, so they're saying that's where the not with exception. So they're saying like majority of the report is in compliance, but we have 2 that they called out as not in compliance that they're noting.
So back to, this is how it's always tricky.
Yeah.
And that's something we debate and as a team quite often is what are we going to mark the overall report?
Right.
So you can see on the left side, those are the ones that are in compliance. The ones on the right side are non-compliant, which is why we put the middle of the mark for the overall report. But you are correct.
This slide was
Those-
extremely helpful for me, because when you go through each one, even like reading it, like there was one I had to read like really bad, like 3 times, because it was like, I feel like it was just worded funny. Where did I say? It was like indicator 2 somewhere. But I was like, what is
And I will
this
tell you,
thing?
even within this chart, there are parts that are compliant and parts that are not compliant. So even this little markup here is one that we struggle with because, well, part of the
it is.
population's in compliance, part is not. But we're not okay with, like, we could have put,
No,
compliant with exceptions.
Yeah.
But we didn't because we're like, this isn't good enough for us. Like,
I
we
just-
want it.
I just think when I heard the presentation and talks about the survey, it was a lot of talks about improving extracurricular activity. I would have loved to hear
Okay.
more about these 2 areas that,
Yeah.
there are some improvements, but I would love to hear more of the stats besides just we're going to continue since we are not.
So one of the things that Diana brought up is that I want to revisit, just so we can make that connection, is that, and you'll see the data has improved from the year before about the number of out-of-school suspensions has significantly decreased. The number of those, the number of in-school suspensions has gone up from the year before. And what Diana's talking about when she says we are using less exclusionary practices, we have found that in-school suspending kids is way more impactful than out-of-school suspending them. Shocker. That sending them home when parents are probably working, they're watching TV on their devices.
Right.
We're better off keeping them in school. And then Diana described the lessons that are being developed to teach about vaping. I don't remember what you said, bullying. We're better off keeping them, you know, excluded from their class, unfortunately, but teaching them, what did they do wrong? Like if they were vaping, we want to teach them about the importance of being healthy about vaping. I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that, and also like restorative is always a part of it too, is like, is there, instead of a removal for an entire day, could we just do a partial removal, you know, for a time where like restricting privileges versus removing privileges completely. So maybe they aren't going outside for recess and, you know, and we're coming up with a different plan for a while. And like innately, we're teaching them what they should be doing at recess or something like that. So like using alternatives to those typical suspensions. And I think one of our biggest disproportionality areas in suspension is around our students with disabilities. And so I think a lot of that is around, is that programming work, is to build our capacity about how to manage and support behavior before it rises to the level where we're needing to remove, or that's what would be a response on that continuum of consequences that like the district has done a lot of work around, is like, we do have a wide continuum. And so how do we find ourselves in the more least restrictive kind of consequences when we're seeing those behaviors, and hoping to correct or change or teach or whatever it takes at that point before we have to get over here to the more restrictive with lots more removals and things like that. And so it's around, you know, building our capacity. And so working with our case managers to build behavior intervention plans, to understand the functions of behaviors and things like that. In addition, like working with outside supports too, like maybe there's learners that we've tried a lot of things and we aren't successful and we're still having to remove. And so we've brought in different supports to teach ourselves. And I talked about at our last board meeting too, about how we're teaching our support staff too, knowing that our support staff are the ones that our educational assistants are the ones a lot of times supporting our students that have more significant behavioral needs that might lead to removals. And so giving them the understanding around behavior, around that brain science, and being able to kind of spot things again before we get to that level.
Is the board interested in hearing more about behavioral practices that they're integrating within the schools? I know I just had a note on mine personally that the behavior seems to be a consistent thing if we're talking within the community, whether it's bullying, whether it's, you know, whatever, like behavior seems to be misunderstood. And I know that there's certain situations where it's that big continuum where every single situation and student is different, but maybe perhaps if the board also understood what that continuum looked like, maybe then we would help ambassador to the community. Cause I think there's still some, it's a consistent, I hear it all the time. I'm sure people also hear it too, that behavior across all levels, across all subgroups is definitely something that's misunderstood, I think, within the community and perhaps.
Agreed. We hear a lot about it as administration, of course, as well. And, you know, we are constantly working as a team to try to figure out, you know, sending this child home is what sometimes the community, whatever, whoever that is, quote unquote, wants. That is not in the best interest of the community overall, because the child's not learning anything most often. And so we're constantly trying to figure out, okay, we know that we may need to remove for safety, but we have to teach. We have to teach. That is the key to this. So otherwise the behavior never changes. Like if they get to go home and watch TV, that's never going to change the behavior. Right. So Gussie, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to ask, and maybe you covered that already. So the students I know they all have different needs, different levels. Do they have adequate staff, you know, to like be with each student, depending on how much attention they need, you know, how much care to be with them all the time?
Yeah, I mean, so like the level of support and, you know, if it's additional adult support or, you know, like ensuring that the response to, you know, like if that is what is needed, you know, we've got teams that wrap around at the buildings if someone becomes like in a behavioral crisis or if the learner needs support so that like to prevent a behavioral crisis. So all of those decisions are IEP team driven. And so they make, you know, the IEP team decides what level of support is required in order for that student to be successful. And like right now, we are staff. We don't have.
And we just made a decision for next year's budget because the budget is tight. We are moving a district level coordinator position back into the building for a dean position to help with behavior. We know that that's a need. So we're always trying to listen to our staff and to the community. And I hear you that you probably hear that at the board level. And so I think the more we can give information about what we're trying to do, the better for everybody. Most important, the kids.
Yeah.
Like we all want the behavior to change and be the best it can be. Like we're all on the same page, community, board, staff, administration. So just a matter of making it happen.
Yeah.
I can't find it, but I know I seen, we hired a behavioral specialist, correct?
Like a behavior support coach.
And then there was another, I can't find.
The PBIS coordinator.
So we hired two.
That's just a stipend though.
Yeah.
So that,
Okay.
yeah. So
Okay.
the behavior,
Right.
yeah.
Are they like in their roles and actively working them and we just haven't seen like results, or are we seeing results now from this stipend?
We are seeing results.
Yeah, definitely. And so I think, I think the model of that is to be part of that problem solving and that programming and kind of like let's come up with the plan, let's work the plan and this person has the capacity to be able to come into that building and stay there and support the team and kind of keep tweaking the plan and do that work that's challenging and takes a lot of capacity in order to kind of do that and get to know the kids. And so we definitely have seen the results. That's like our learners that are requiring that high level of support. She's absolutely in there and supporting the teams and providing that high level.
And that just started this fall.
Correct.
Okay,
Mhm.
so maybe we'll.
So this is last year's data. that we're
Right,
looking
so
at.
maybe we'll see something a little different because we have the extra supports. We're hoping.
I mean, that would be the hope, right? Mhm.
We're working towards.
Yep.
Well, we have seen like a decrease in out of school suspensions, an increase in school, and that is leading to more time for learning. Now we need the behavior to
Right.
improve it.
But if I'm hearing correctly, your in-school suspensions are very structured.
Right. That's what, and we're looking to increase this, like continue to increase that structure so that there is a strong learning component. So the good thing about in-school suspensions too is that they have access to their learning. You know what I mean? So we're able to bring the learning to them when they're in that alternative space. But then in addition, not just like the classroom learning, but like learning targeted and shaping or changing behavior.
I know this is defined in the report. Extracurricular includes sports and
Yes.
the clubs.
Yep.
I want to say, okay.
Yes.
So what do we do to promote those? Like, how do people know? Because I sat in on ECP presentations and students were telling me of clubs I didn't even know we offered, right? And so I think about, I'm sure the exit survey or whatever you're doing as far as people engaging with the school and engaging the students, asking about that. Is it something we don't offer, or is it truly that they just didn't know it even existed?
It's hard to say, right? Like we definitely prioritize our incoming ninth grade students with Great Start, with other opportunities for them. Like, for example, our eighth graders came over in the spring, and they do an involvement fair then. Emily Hendricks has worked really hard on building a website that houses all of our extracurricular activities. And she's also built a calendar on there that those groups are able to add to it of when they're meeting. So we're trying to raise awareness of what we offer. And we do have a wide variety, but that is something that we hear from students all the time. I didn't know we had that. Or like youth apprenticeship is another example of like, I didn't even know about youth apprenticeship. So we're really trying really hard to close that gap. We use advisory. We have a specific lesson that's on extracurriculars and shows them the website. But some of it's just word of mouth too.
Oh, yeah.
So it's definitely an area that we can always grow. But I think like the presence on our website is going to help. and just students being more involved will lead to.
I think it's only been 2 years that there's been a club fair during Great Start. The last 2 years has been
It's
where,
been a Great Start longer.
Has it been?
The last 2 years of our 8th grade transition.
what I'm thinking of is the
Yeah.
8th grade spring where they go over during the school day
Yep.
and go
It's
through.
been at like, or what we called orientation
Yeah.
or, you know,
Mhm.
picture day, whatever you want to call it. It's
Yeah.
been there for a while, I think.
But I know that the high school, and Emily has just been a champion of this, is always willing to take ideas, thoughts about how to make sure kids know about it.
Another thing over the last year or so, we've revamped our Narski Mentor program, which is student-led, and they go and talk to students about different opportunities. So as those students are involved, they can then share their experience or connect them with another student who may be interested in something similar. So that's something that I think we're going to continue to see as a positive as well.
I have to say I was impressed with the changes in attendance. I think the communication was definitely working. Whatever we did was working. It's not where we want it to be, right? Obviously, but I think it's a vast improvement from where we were. So kudos to you guys for that. I honestly thought maybe 10.6, like when we think about additions for stuff, is that like we heard Tess talk about that too, like just protecting ourselves. You know, when we talk about tolerating any behaviors or actions or attitudes by adults who have contact with students, I think about Parent Square and that being our tool of communication for volunteers and staff and protecting staff and volunteers and students from the grooming, from, you know, the sexual misconduct, whatever it may be. I just wonder if that's something that we want to potentially track, like somehow that all whatever extracurriculars or whatever are using Parent Square as their means of communication.
Like another indicator you're seeing?
I mean, I just feel like it might help also be prevented, like proactive in answering the additional, like the question that we're asking right now is like, do all behave, like, are we monitoring that enough by just saying that the misconduct is reported to HR?
Yeah, so I guess maybe another way to think about it or ask it is there an explicit policy that staff and volunteers and activity leaders are not allowed to have one-on-one contact with students that are not their children?
I thought about that, but then I was like, I don't know if I want to limit it to just, because I imagine teachers use email, right, to students' email.
But one-on-one, that's, and Parent Square, it's never one-on-one, right?
Right.
So I do think what I'm hearing from the board is an interest in administration taking the 10.6 and thinking about an indicator that helps maybe match to the legal update that we just got. And that we come back with a recommendation of a tool and or an indicator or measure. And I see Nate taking notes. What this could be. And we just caught each other's eyes, and Kathy Williams and Russ, like since the legislation came out, we have been ready to jump on exactly what that needs to look like in the employee handbook, coaches handbook, coaches training, you know, all of that. So I think it's a good one to explore. It gives us a little more like teeth.
Yeah.
And I think that's very relevant to 10.6.
Yeah. I mean, again, we talk about all the things that we're hearing, right? And knock on wood, that hasn't happened here, but we hear about it happening in other communities and other school districts. And I feel like we have, like, there could potentially be tools we're already using that we could monitor and make sure that we're being proactive about that not happening.
That sounds good. It matches with where we want to head as administration. So it's a good alignment, and we'll bring it back as something for you guys to be. Does that make the does it match what you're thinking in policy as well?
I do, I know Sue kind of chimed in this too. I do really want to highlight this. Like,
that was nice.
This is really helpful.
Because we all do it when we're looking at, we all go through, well, which ones
You
are.
put like a floss or a check or whatever you do, like to make sure, like reading it, am I reading this like we are in compliance or we are not? And each indicator is very different and very unique. And sometimes we get wrapped up in the whole and you're like, wait a minute, I read, it said compliant, but this isn't, we're not meeting the mark. And
Right.
so, this was extremely helpful, to view as an entirety for the report, I think. Other questions?
I wanted to go back to the extracurricular, and you said some of them were, they had activities outside of school.
Mhm.
And like, can you give me some examples or?
Yeah, students being involved in their church, or for 4-H was a big one that I heard. Student.
Some club sports, I heard.
Yeah,
Club sports, time in
Yep.
school.
Highlight
Working, so you'll notice like the subgroup that we think about a lot is our students that are considered, economically disadvantaged, or students that might qualify for free and reduced lunch. They're working every day, and it's like they can't do a club after school. So that's another one that like, well, they're still like really involved and committed, and so those are the things that's why 90% maybe doesn't feel right, because there's a lot of good in all the things we just said.
Well, and because it made, the thought I had was, including those sorts of things in our percentage or in what we're doing. So does it need to specifically be what's provided by the school district? Or are we just concerned that they're involved in something?
Like surveying them or something?
It'd be hard to track
Good
that.
questions.
I mean, if we,
Right.
right, so if part of your survey, and if, there's number, I don't know how you do it. But if you're not involved in a school-based club or activity, why not? Or what do you do?
Could you ask it like too, are you involved in one or more activities, whether they be in school or out of school? I mean, if you're not concerned with it being a provided school activity,
Right.
is it,
And that is something we promote to students through their ACP, is that involvement doesn't just mean school. There's a lot of different ways that you can be involved. It's just really hard to track that, because we track all of these things through Skyward, we're able to pull it out. When it comes to those others, it's going to be hard to try to gather all that and really sit together.
I'm trying to think of like when my own son was in high school, he would call, I'm involved, I'm with an online gaming group. Mom would not call that. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe.
I have a question on the capacity building. There was asked for continued funding for growth in our co-curricular and extracurricular activities. I don't know that I personally know that how we fully understand how they're funded right now. And so I wonder if you're asking the board for capacity building on additional funds for them, maybe we understand how they're funded now. I think we all see the fundraisers that go out for different groups, what they're funding for. What does the school actually provide that you would need more for that growth?
That's a great question, because it is a really misunderstood. I see Kathy Davis smiling back there. She would love to provide that.
I mean, if you think about like all of the clubs that we offer,
Yep.
right? How do they get their funding?
And there's
Do
a
we
lot of
fund that? Do you need more funding from the board? Like,
Yeah.
what does that look like?
I would,
With
no,
like, is, I would say the majority comes through funding the advisor, the paid advisor in Fund 10. And then there's tons of fundraising efforts that come through our Fund 21 gift account that almost every activity club participates.
So basically, the district pays for the advisor. Everything else is required by fundraising. And this is true like across the state. This isn't just a DeForest thing.
And it's required to have an
can-
advisor.
We can bring back more education about that. So
It's just a lot.
we will.
If we're looking for additional funds to go in certain buckets, as we look at the budget, does that, for capacity building, does that, an understanding of that?
I think that's fair. And yeah, the purpose of this was to talk about funding advisors. And as we continue to grow and increase our programming, that means increasing stipends.
Yeah.
The number of stipends. And I know we spent a lot of time on that over the last couple of years, trying to wrap our heads around that process too, because we are growing quick. So,
We just did the retirement reception where I think Mrs. Bernard said, I can't even list how many things she was an advisor for,
Yeah.
right? So you think about as our clubs continue to grow and we need more and more advisors, Yeah, okay. Any other questions?
Yes, I do have a quick one about student voice. So what are the students or the groups that don't feel that they're, I guess if they have student voice or that it's being heard, that would be the 10.4.
Oh, when we fall below the average,
Indicator
yeah.
one,
Yeah.
segregated groups.
So do we have an idea? I mean, it seems consistent that some are falling below.
It got better from the year before, and in the area that still stands out is students that are Black. Went from 2.89 to 2.83 as a score. We don't really have an idea why at this point. Like I don't unless you guys have dug in at all. We do have the BSU at the high school. We could ask more, at least of that group, a little bit more to dig in. We are pleased that, some of our other groups also, improved
Yes.
from the year before.
But aren't these really small groups?
They,
So
I mean,
that
yeah.
A little
Yes.
shift shows up
Good.
as a bigger
Yeah.
percentage. That is an issue. Small groups. Yeah.
I still think your suggestion would be the smart thing to do if we're, I don't want to say seeing a trend, but 2 years in a row at the data, but if you continue to see that, it's worth asking that particular group to see if they feel the same way, that their voice isn't being heard, and if it's not, why, or what can you do? Other questions? Hearing none. Entertain a motion on this report. This isn't your norm.
Acceptance of the report.
Approval?
Was present.
Approval. As percent. Okay. We have a motion.
I'll second that.
We have a second. Yeah, I see that. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? That motion passes. We are on to item C, reviewing the potential indicator changes, and they did go through these in their report. Is there any questions on, there was 2 of them, right? For this particular one? 3? Oh, yeah, because it was, yeah, same thing, but just, yeah. My only question revolved around, we're just removing K1. We're not adding, potentially adding a K1 with the savers information.
Well, because the teacher completes it for the student, so it's 100% because they be approved to the students. Whereas starting in 2nd grade, the student
It's
completes.
a self-assessment.
That shows up in 3 or.
Yeah. Their rating. Yeah, not self. I say self because you said it, but yeah, okay. Any other questions on the indicator changes, suggestions? Okay. Input for the summary statement. Anybody?
A lot of conversation around.
Yeah, there were a lot of good questions. Is there any thoughts from either of the governance officers, or you have enough, or you want to recap? You're
I
good?
have plenty.
Jan has plenty.
I have plenty.
Okay. Jan has plenty? You're good? Okay. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Or are you staying for
They
OE11?
stay.
Sorry.
They get
Okay, I was
to
like,
stay.
Item E, presentation on possible approval of board policy OE11.
Okay. And so OE11, our instructional program here, so you can keep going, Chris, there we go. So the strengths of this report is that our standards alignment, our high school electives, and our state assessment participation continue to have opportunities to grow in our visible academic and social emotional learning targets, supporting our high school students in setting ACP goals, and the documentation of our tier 1 differentiation. So this is There's 8 defined expectations with 23 indicators. 15 of those indicators met the benchmark and 8 indicators are below the indicated benchmark. And then here you see that chart, which kind of delineates those met indicators and the indicators that aren't not met. So the evidence that we're using here is our curriculum review cycle. We utilize gradebook schedules and rosters from our Skyward system. We are using EduClimber smart forms, our educator effectiveness feedback, our report card assessment participation, our district continuous improvement plans, and survey data that we get from all of our building leaders. And so now we're going to talk about our prior year capacity building action plans and outcomes.
All right, first one, we talked about the change to the high school schedule. I think the biggest impact that we saw that would be in this report is the addition of a class for students. So taking 8 classes instead of 7. What we noticed with that, and not surprising, but it increased the amount of programming that students have exposure to in terms of electives, and then especially Law Day as well. So we saw an increase in Law Day. Students have more opportunities to take courses, which gives them more opportunity to take classes that may be Law Day.
The next one, and we talked about standards-based feedback and really thinking about the standards defined by the state and having a feedback focus on that. As you know, we're really going into standards-based learning and grading this year, also known as evidence-based learning and feedback. We've done learning with staff on professional development days. We have time with staff to collaborate on those days, to get into the work and really think about what the standards are, how are they gathering evidence, and how are they providing feedback to students. We will continue this learning next year as well to help continue to support our staff with this.
And then we talked a lot about our continued work around our MLSS system, or our multi-level systems of support. And we continue to do a lot of work on updating our district handbook so that we continue to have continuity and calibration across our system of who needs to be provided additional services and support, what that additional services and support looks like. And then we're being really cognizant about building behavioral response into that multi-level system of support. So our handbook really supports the work that we're doing at all of our levels.
All right, so next we're going to break down the areas of improvement. So going through each indicator. For this, you will see some action plan items again being on multiple slides. First one being the professional development plan. So as we look at the prioritized standards, focusing on high school, we saw a nice increase from 81% to 93%. Not quite to 100 yet, but this is part of the process of our grading for learning work. As we work with teams and really dive in deeper, we've been able to get more teams on board, which has helped increase that percentage. Of our 143 courses, we still have some to go to get that up to 100%. But as we continue that work with teams and really diving into the standards and skills that are most essential for their courses, we're going to continue to see that percentage increase.
The next one is around learning targets for social emotional learning lessons. The indicator above that as well, even though it is not listed here, because we did meet the benchmark when it comes to PLCs. But when you think about learning targets, what this is about making sure that you know the learning outcome and what it looks like to meet that outcome, and you communicate it to students. And so while the indicator above this, the 11.2 indicator 2, talks about how staff are really, it's represented in their PLC discussions, the time when they're coming together to collaborate about learning. It's really about this is making it come to the student. So this indicator on social emotional learning, how are we communicating the learning outcome to the student, which is the ultimate next step in that. And so when you will see the professional development plan on there, because as I said, we're continuing that learning next year, as Chris referenced, and really trying to make sure that learning is visible to our students.
Next one, 11.3, middle school grade books aligned to standards domains. This did dip below 100% this year. And part of that was due to the middle school changing their schedule, created a lot of change in their elective offerings. So for example, in art, instead of just having one art option, they had 2 art options. With the creative expressions, it went from having 1 option to 3 options. So there was a lot of choice that was expanded in our offerings for middle school. So as we continue to do that work with staff, similar to that I mentioned with high school, it's just going to be making sure that everything is in alignment with those courses and those new offerings, even in areas that we are able to expand over time. The next one is the high school version of standards domain. Again, we did see a percentage from 90 to 95%. Similar sentiment as we continue this work with teams, team by team, class by class. We're going to continue to see this increase as we align all of this work together. Next one, 11.5, indicator 1, students setting ACP goals. This is something that they currently do through their advisory class. This is something similar to the student engagement survey that we need to make sure that we're collaborating with leadership, collaborating with teachers to make sure that we are following up with students to make sure that they are completing the goal setting activity. However, there's a lot of different things that students are doing to set their ACP plans. And that's starting in 4th grade all the way up to high school, but it's really just making sure that we're getting this information documented because the students are using that information as they continue their ACP that leads to ultimately their presentation at the very end of their senior year. 11.5 indicator 3, LAUDE. We still have subgroups. We had 2 subgroups, students with a disability and students who are economically disadvantaged that aren't within that 5% that we explained in the previous report. So this is something that as we continue to look at course selection, as we think about our offerings, it's really important that we make sure that all of our courses are accessible to all, that we are sharing information with students and families in a way that makes sure that all students have the ability to access them and be successful. We're also looking at increasing the number of LAUDE options for our 9th grade students, which is something that we haven't really done previously. So that's something that we can get students more exposure to early with the idea of making LAUDE just part of the track that they're on.
All right, the next one is regarding our multi-level systems of support. And so the indicator is around the SMART forms, which is essentially just a document inside of EduClimber where staff indicate how they're supporting students, and they indicate how they're supporting students during the Norski block, but also during the classroom instruction. And so the area of improvement or our action plan to support that is we have reconfigured the multi-level systems of support district team. So historically, we have had representatives K-12 come together periodically throughout the year to review our system, the handbook that Diana had mentioned, and really trying to define the system. What we have found is that it wasn't always the most efficient process. And so we have decided with the leadership, we have worked on reconfiguring it. So we have a micro and a macro team. And the macro team is that larger group. It also has added teacher representatives, and they only meet twice a year, but their role is really to look at our data and to make sure, is our system truly supporting our students the way we want it to help us really check the health of our system. The micro team is really working on defining and refining the system, and they meet more frequently, monthly, to really dive in, and it has smaller representation from all the levels, different roles, to really hone in on our system and really refine and tweak it along the way so that we are more consistent.
Last one, 11.7, this is our educator effectiveness. So we really focus with our leadership teams on giving feedback around Danielson 3C, which is engaging students in learning. So when we're pulling this information, we want to make sure that our leaders are giving feedback to our staff on the engagement that they saw in the learning environment. And so one of our action steps is bringing this back to our leadership team and making it a consistent item that we continue to come back and we talk about what does engagement in the classroom look like, what are those elements, and how do we give really strong feedback around those.
All right, so the next part is talking about additional action steps that we're going to be taking. And so we kind of referenced quite a bit the professional development plan, and some of the work that we are doing this year is really focusing on those standards and our collaboration practices and co-design with our case managers. And so the plan for next year is kind of combining all of those things together. And so we sort of learned the what of all of those things. And now it's about the how. How do we design instruction that's based on standards, that's really accessible to all of our learners? And so that's kind of going to be the learning that, is, if all of these things are aligned, we'll be able to continue to see growth in all of these indicators.
And then referencing again, the reconfiguration of the multi-level systems of support team is something that's going to also help us when students may need extra support or enrichment or support with behavior. How are we providing that support in a systematic way as a K-12 and really coming together, collaborating in a more efficient team? So now thinking about future potential indicator revisions, there are two, and I will say that these were referenced in last year's board report, and we're bringing them forward again because sometimes where we are with our learning, things have to kind of pause. And I say that when I look at this one. So this one we had put last year as well. When we were looking at revisions for 11.2, it's 2 and 3, we had referenced collaborating with leaders on is this the best evidence? And that's when we're talking about those learning targets for academic learning, social emotional learning. And in reality, as Diana just referenced, we have done so much learning as a K-12 system about defining the what this year, that the next step is how do we get students there? And part of getting them there is them knowing the learning targets, which is what these indicators are. So continued learning as a leadership team and calibration on our educator effectiveness. We may have revisions to this. So we don't have anything to bring forward to you now, but we want you to know that that is a continued conversation for us to think about how are we giving you the best data and is this the best way to get it to you? So that is one. Oh, no. The other one is 11.6 indicator 1. We actually, again, don't have a new data point to bring to you, but it is something that we brought forward last year and we don't have a great answer for as well. But when we think about the reconfiguration of the MLSS team, I think we have a really good avenue to have a lot of eyes and thoughts around this. And this is that indicator where on the EduClimber smart forms, staff have to indicate how they support students in their regular classroom, tier 1, as well as in Narski time. And in reality, in order to get that data, for example, if we have 700 students in intervention, a staff member has to open up every single smart form for all 700 students to determine that, to get that data. That is a lot of time, and is it the best indicator for what you're asking for, what the policy is? So one of the things we would like to have happen is when the macro MLSS team meets this summer is to have them help us think of what could be a better data point to help support that policy. And with that,
So for that presentation and the report, we've marked it in compliance with exception.
Make a motion to accept the report.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, you can ask questions.
I guess I'd start by saying it's very clear there's continuous improvements on every front here. So thank you for that. You can tell there's a lot of hard work that goes into this.
Can you explain 11.6 indicator 1, like the evidence that you brought forward? What does it mean when it said they had notes that called out the classroom?
so we have a smart form, and in it, there's various things that we do to record how we support students. And one of the things in there is a variety of ways that teachers indicate how they support students in their tier 1 classroom. So for example, if I am a 2nd grade teacher and I'm teaching my students and I have some students who through data we have determined need additional support in literacy because they are showing that they're not quite reading at 2nd grade level yet, we're going to determine their intervention, how we're supporting them during Narski time, but then what also am I doing in my tier 1 classroom? What am I doing when I'm teaching everybody every day? How am I supporting that student to know and give them access to that tier 1 curriculum? So they have to indicate that in the smart form. So then our staff members, when they determine who is getting an intervention, they go in and they create a form, a smart form in EduClimber for every single student that is determined needs that support. So we can document the support we're getting. What data, what did we use to determine that What intervention strategy are we using? How frequently are we meeting with them? What assessment probe are we using to see if it has impact? But then also what supports are we putting in place in the tier 1 instruction? So that is what that is. So they have to indicate in that smart form, what are they doing every day in the classroom to support that student outside of Norski 10.
That's where progress monitoring sits too, right? Inside that's
In the smart form, we have it pulled in. We have the systems connected. Data in.
Weber to FastBridge.
Correct.
I paraphrase to make sure I understand.
Absolutely.
Basically, tier 1 intervention is inside classroom intervention. Tier 2 is a higher level of intervention where they're getting extra support outside of the classroom. And tier 3 is kind of the highest level of intervention.
Yes, tier 1 is what
Yes.
everybody's getting.
Yes.
And so like the form, so like, let's say I was receiving intervention, my form that Kate kind of mentioned that a staff person pulls and sees, it says like Diana's receiving tier 2 intervention. Here's the tool that they're using. So like Horton Gillingham, it's going to be 3 times per week for 30 minutes. We're going to progress monitor using this probe. And then there's a spot where we want teachers to say, and this is what we're doing when she's in the classroom. It's that spot.
And that spot only 76% of the time has anything in it for those tiered that receive extra support for tier 2, tier 3.
That doesn't mean it's not happening in the tier
yeah,
1. It's documented in that form, which is why it's something where is that the best indicator?
Okay.
Because when I read your policy, we understand what you're trying to get at, and that is a way to define it, but is it the best way?
We've had that indicator I inherited it in 2018. It's something we've had a long time. I don't think it's moving the needle well enough.
I don't think I just, like, how you worded that, I did not. That is not what I got out of it. So I'm glad that I asked the question to explain what was actually
And that
happening.
was
Because I'm like,
Yeah.
we're only helping 76%. Like, what?
Right.
No.
Yes, just documentation wise. That
I
makes
appreciate too how you paraphrase, because I know we throw a
Yes.
lot of
Yes.
verbiage out.
versus what she said. It was easy. So was yours. Your example of you.
So Kate, your that you shared is that you'll be taking the blue box back to the MLSS smaller team.
Yes.
Bigger
Smaller and bigger team. The
Okay.
bigger team is meeting in June, but yes, a smaller team will also interact. The bigger team will hopefully provide us some really good ideas.
They will, because when teachers see this, they always come up with ideas that are
Better represented.
and represented and also impactful, more impactful.
Right.
Chris, can you explain on 11.5, like our ACP goals, like how often are they checked for when you say that they're set? Are we checking them at certain points in their high school stage?
Yeah, so they're done annually.
Okay.
So this is something that students would interact with at the beginning of each school year.
Okay.
And it's something that through advisory, it's not something that we monitor, but it's something that they go back at the end, mid-year and end of year and check their progress and make adjustments.
So this number would be fall of 2025
Mhm.
for all 9th through 12th graders,
Yeah,
not including 8th grade, just 9th through 12th at the high
Yes.
school. Okay. Okay. I have one more question. We're doing evidence-based learning. How is that possible if we don't have standards for every class?
Well, there's always evidence of
Making sure.
evidence of student learning is still evidence of student learning. The standard is defining the outcome.
Correct.
I'll let you jump in.
It's just
It's mostly at the high school
it's
is
looking
what I
more-
see, right?
Some of it's at the middle school. It's
Okay.
looking more traditional.
right. It's more the documentation of it. The teachers and PLCs are interacting with it. And so like the recommitment to the evidence-based learning is helping them go back into their standards and really help define what are the outcomes that they want to see from students.
But if they don't have them defined, then how do students know that they're achieving them or how to achieve them?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I can tell you, like,
I was just confused. I thought it was a dumb question. Okay. Okay.
Right.
I was dumb. I was like, wait a minute.
They're still getting things like a percentage on a test
Right.
versus
Yeah.
a percentage.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And
it's
that's
more shifting it to the model of assessing them based on the standard and skill. Right, whereas like some curriculums like that, yeah, you're giving a test and it's not always defined in terms of what the outcome is. And we are really working hard with teams so that they can define those outcomes, so they can give specific evidence back to students.
Right.
And so I think it's a lot of it is regrounding, but then it's also, there are a lot of teachers that are singletons that teach a lot of different courses. So it's really going through, like, we're spending a lot of time with teachers and teams, 143 different courses at the high school to make sure that we get all of them correct. And so it is a little bit of a process.
And
This was
going
actually really
back and doing stuff too, right?
Yes.
I just worry about too, you said that even like, so say we had creative expressions at the middle school and we added 2 more, so they had more options,
Mhm.
but we added them without having standards in place. Do you know what I'm saying? So like, wouldn't you have the standards and then add the class?
So that one that I talked about was, it was a grade book.
Okay.
It wasn't a
Okay.
standards issue. It's just that how it was being reported didn't align with the other class that was already in place. And so that's something that was just an oversight based on, like I said, the new options, and something that we're gonna go back and make sure is corrected.
And if I was reading the report right, it is 100% of middle school. It's only 10 courses in the high school that are
Correct.
left.
Yes.
We've gone from
Yep.
6 to 93.
There's been significant improvements. Yeah, I know that there's been a lot of talk around evidence-based learning, and I think if we're gonna explain it to like, here's the standards, right? And here's what you expect out of the rubric from the students. Here's what you want to see if you're at this level, this level, this level. It's really hard to have that and then, or not have that, but then grade them based on parts of.
It has to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
Do you feel like, I mean, given the rate, it looks like is it reasonable to assume that you guys are on pace for this coming year?
I think so, because one of the things that we're taking to teams next year is a new way to document all this information. So their skills, their standards, their outcomes. And so that's something that we are going to use to then audit annually to make sure that that information is accurate and they can take back to teams. So that is a specific action step that we're taking with all of our 7-12 teams to make sure that that information is clear and it's also available, which I think you're getting at too now.
Other questions? Hearing none. I would entertain a motion on the report.
Make a motion to approve the report as presented.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes. Well, we'll keep you guys here because you don't really have any review of potential indicators because you don't have any to bring forward, but just noting maybe in their summary statement that there are potential indicator changes to come in the future.
Maybe next year we'll be ready to actually put in.
All right, thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Input for the summary statement. Good? Good? Sounds good. Okay, all right. That brings us to public input, which I have none. It brings us to board consent agenda. Would somebody care to make that motion?
I'll move to approve the board consent agenda.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That brings us to superintendent consent agenda. Would somebody care to make that motion?
I'll move approval of the superintendent's consent agenda.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? That motion passes. That brings us to our reorg meeting. So I think Anne graciously printed off the reorg election process for each of you at your spot. Does anybody have any questions on that? We reviewed this at our last work session. Is there any questions before we get started on the process? It wasn't changed, if that matters.
It's on the- They were kind of stuck.
Lots of papers. Anne printed off lots of papers.
Oh, she does have it? Okay, I do.
Any other questions on that?
More.
No?
Okay,
Bless you.
we're ready? So,
Yeah.
Are there any nominees for president of the Board of Education?
We nominate Gail Lovett.
Do you accept the nomination?
Yes. I accept the nomination.
Okay, if there are no more, oops, I'm sorry. Are there any other nominations for the president of the Board of Education? Are there any other nominations for the president of the Board of Education? Are there any other nominations for the president of the Board of Education? If there are, now it's time. If there are no more nominations, nominations for president are now closed. Gail is now the president. Claire is the winner of, now I'm better off without a script. I'll declare the president of the Board of Education.
Thank you.
And thank goodness I get to turn it over to someone.
All right, I will call for nominations for vice president. Any nominations for vice president?
I'll nominate Brian Coker for vice president.
Do you accept your nomination? I also have a nomination from Megan Taylor, so I'm just gonna say that. I want to, because there's two of you, I want to give you guys time to speak. Megan has sent me like 2 sentences to read out loud, so if you wanted your 2 minutes. Are there any, I should ask if there's any other nominations for VP? Say VP. Yes. Okay. Any other nominations for VP? Oh, I thought you were gonna, any other nominations for VP? Okay. All right, nominations are now closed.
Yeah, so I guess I'm interested in becoming the vice president because I feel like I've got a fair amount of experience on this board at this point. I'm comfortable sitting in the spot of president when needed. And I think that from a succession planning standpoint, I'm willing to step into the role of president if Gail decides that she's not interested in taking that on next year. So I'm willing to step up and do that.
I will read what Megan wrote. She said, unfortunately, she can't be here. She is at her first graders music concert tonight. So know that she wanted to be here but couldn't. She said vice president is her first choice. She is grounded in communication, accountability, and collaboration, and committed to continuing to help our board evolve and include all board members in all roles. This position is not one that she has held yet, and she's also interested in using this as a way to gain more knowledge from the president of the board. We continually talk about succession planning, and I would love to use this as an opportunity to learn and hopefully one day serve as president. All right. Now on to our ballots.
Paper ballot.
Yep.
It's secret, though. We don't have to sign it.
You don't have to spare.
No, I just.
Yeah, I
tried
know.
to-
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I don't remember what, but for something.
I feel like we have two
Yeah.
for something.
It might have been something else. It was a weird.
And something that was a yes, no.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna read them and Anne's gonna tally.
Yep.
Okay. Brian. 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 Goodness. Brian. Brian.
Unanimous for Brian.
Okay.
7 votes.
Congratulations, Brian. Now I will take nominations for clerk.
I'll nominate myself for clerk.
Okay. Do you accept your nomination? Any other nominations for clerk?
I'll just throw out, I'm willing to serve in any capacity. I just didn't tell Ann, so I've not.
So are you nominating yourself?
No.
Oh, no. Okay.
But I will say that I work close by and I'm
Available.
available.
So is that a nomination for yourself? Do you want somebody to nominate you? No. If I can ask that, but, okay. I have a nomination from, Megan has put in for clerk as well. So just.
Okay, do the speeches.
Yes. After I say, are there any other nominations?
3 times.
Still have another.
Any other nominations?
Dusty also
Oh, Dusty.
indicated that she was interested.
Yep. You interested in the clerk?
Um,
Do you accept your nomination? Yeah, I do accept. Well, I asked her. She accepted her self-nomination.
Well, and that's how we're getting Megan's
Yeah.
too. Megan expressed
Yep.
interest.
Right. You can nominate yourself. I just want to make sure you want
It's
to
just that
accept.
you're in person.
Yes, you changed your mind.
So,
okay, yeah.
Yes, okay.
Okay.
Any other nominations for clerk? Sure you don't want to nominate yourself, Jan?
No.
Okay. Any other nominations? Did I say it 3 times already? Any other nominations?
Just say it again.
Okay. Hearing none, the nominations are now closed. We will do a ballot. Or no,
Do they
2
want
minutes.
speeches?
Oh, we get
Speeches start. Yep. Do you want them to start?
Hi, my name is Stephanie. I'm interested in the clerk position. I previously had the position. I enjoyed it. There was a lot of things that we learned together, me and Ann learned together, the changes, and whoever gets the position, I just say you have to really pay attention. It's not just about, you have to really be vigilant in looking at all of the data and being present. So whoever gets it, that's just my thing. I don't know if there's any more changes that happened, but it was fun. It was a good experience, and I enjoyed it.
And you're talking about the Board of Canvassers, right?
Right.
When you
That
served
point,
on the
yes.
Board of Canvassers, that is one of the duties of the clerk is to serve on the Board of Canvassers. So, yeah, that we did learn a lot.
So yeah, that is, I think that's the most interesting part of it. And then you sign papers. But I enjoyed the position. That was one position that I did enjoy.
Gus?
Oh, and everybody's trying to look at me. Okay, so I'm actually not running for anything this time. So this is my chance to actually serve in that role, I think, and actually fulfill it and do the Board of Canvassing. You know, this is my shot. I haven't held this position before, and I would think it would be something that I could fulfill, you know, something that I could do in a way that I could serve the board, a way I could get more experience doing something different. And like I said, it happens to be a time when I'm not on the ballot, so I can actually count the vote, right? So I guess, you know.
Did you
This
have
is
to
my
give that up one time?
Huh?
Were you clerk one time and had to give that
No,
up?
I've
No,
never-
okay.
I know.
Yeah, I had to give it.
You had to give it up when you were running?
When I was-
Okay, okay, interesting, okay. Thank you. I will read Megan's. She said this is a position she has not held yet. She has the availability to support it, and she'd love to see the position rotate to all members of the board. All right. So speeches are over and we can vote. We're not for this.
Okay, because we have 3 people, we just re-verified the rules. We
Yep.
need a majority of 4.
Yep.
Otherwise we'll do we'll do a recount, yeah.
There's a second.
Or a
Highest of two.
revote, I should say, a revote. Stephanie. Okay, Stephanie. Gussie. Gussie. Megan. Megan. Stephanie. Okay, we're gonna have to
Bit of a
Mhm.
problem. We don't know.
Just.
I'll I can step out.
Well, you at the highest.
Oh,
I mean, you can
Yeah.
step out if you would like, but
So
so you have to
if
get.
one of us steps out, then
it's
Then we-
between two.
then it's
We vote
between
between
two.
the
then
two.
we still will vote between two.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm. Okay.
I'll step out because I did it before.
You
Okay.
sure?
That's your decision. Okay.
Okay, so we
Okay.
need to re-vote between Megan and Gussie.
Okay. I can come back. Or you guys.
That's right, because I thought.
So if pretty vote numbers.
The first
A
round.
second vote will be cast for the top two candidates receiving the greatest number of ballot votes.
Except for
Stephanie
she's
pulled out.
withdrawn.
I know, but
Before that.
before, we were
unfortunately-
talking about including all
No,
three again. No, we were, okay, sorry, I misunderstood.
So you've turned your
There
ballot.
wasn't a lowest vote to pull out, so it would have had to have been. I don't even know how you do it.
I
But by
thought we
withdrawing,
were
she made it
throwing-
easier.
Yeah, sorry.
Saw that position.
Okay, this is the second round for clerk. Megan? Gussie? Gussie? Megan? Stephanie?
Oh.
Gussie? Gussie. Those four for Gussie,
Gussie got
two for Megan, one for Stephanie. You have it.
Congratulations.
So, yes. Okay. So Gussie is.
Hey, it's a
there.
write-in.
Okay, that brings us to nominations of treasurer. Megan has nominated herself for this position as well. Any other nominations?
I think Stephanie saw.
Do you accept your nomination?
Yes.
Yes. And your name was also on there. Are you accepting your original?
Oh, my
nomination?
name is on there too.
Well, I don't think you can
Once
do
you're
that,
elected.
right? This one across. Any other nominations? Any other nominations? I lost counting it. Is there any other nomination? Okay, all right. Hearing
Dan's
no
been
other
keeping track.
nominations are now closed. We can vote. Oh, speech.
Hi, my name's Stephanie Sarah. I've never held this position. It would be interesting to see what this role entails. And I'm excited. The whole position.
Thank you. Megan also said she has not held this position yet. She has the availability to support it and wants to see the position rotate to all board members. All right, we can vote.
That's why the Neola.
I used to do Neola prizes
Oh,
for
okay.
the administrators.
Yeah.
We would do policy. How fast can you find the policy?
We should do
That was
that.
back when I was a new superintendent. I
Not
had
for
more
Neola.
energy, but yes. Should bring that back.
Yeah, for Kathy's quizzes.
Do it with the board. Okay, are we good?
We're good.
Okay, one for Stephanie. One for Megan. Stephanie. Megan. Stephanie. Stephanie. Stephanie.
Congratulations.
Great speech.
All right, that brings us to election of governance officers. Sue has put her name in the hat. Do you accept your self-nomination?
I do.
Any other nominations?
I'd be willing to continue. since I've been doing.
Okay. We have another nomination. Any other nominations? Any other nomination? You're the last one. It doesn't have anything. I'm just making sure you don't feel left out. Any other
They
nominations?
have to be here to accept the nomination.
Not if they self-nominate.
So like, we wouldn't be able to nominate Jeff or Megan if they're not here to.
I don't think so.
That's what clarification.
Yes.
That, yeah.
Yes,
That's a good-
that is,
that's a good-
yeah.
That's correct.
All right. Nominations are now closed. Would you like to say a speech?
We have
We don't have.
So,
two positions.
Yes,
Yeah.
The two, like, it's the governor.
I have said, I'm good with
Okay.
it.
All right. Congratulations to both of you.
Yes.
Streamline this.
Okay.
Yes, look forward to working.
Item G, schedule regular board meetings, daytime, place, number per month. I would entertain a motion.
Move that we take, have our meetings the second and fourth Monday of the month. At 6 o'clock at district office or in the boardroom.
Okay.
Or other place posted. And 2 per month.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second that.
We have a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Come to the meeting. Item H, cancel regular board meetings due to school breaks. So we have one suggested in July, December, which is winter break and spring break.
Motion to cancel the regular board meetings due to school breaks, July 13th, 2026, December 28th, 2026, and March 26th, 2027.
Wow, you did that really good. I would have screwed up a year. Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Well, second.
All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? That motion passes. Appoint fiscal depository for the district.
That we make, is it DMB?
It is DMB Bank. Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? That passes. Appoint school district legal counsel. We all met Tess O'Brien from Running Lewis and Lacey. I would entertain a motion on that.
I would move that we appoint Renning, Lewis, and Lacey as the district's legal.
Thank you, Jan. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Appointing the school district official newspaper. Currently, it is the Star, the only newspaper we have.
Motion that we appoint the school district official newspaper to be the Star.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second.
Begrudgingly, because it's on the list.
Favor we have.
Yeah.
All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? That passes. That brings us to appointing the delegate and alternate delegate for the WASB 2027 Delegate Assembly. Anybody?
I'd be willing to do it again. Interesting.
We need a alternate or we need a.
I could be alternate or primary, whichever.
Oh, let's see, last year Stephanie was the
Primary and I was the alternate.
alternate, so I don't care.
I would like to give other people opportunities.
Yes.
Everybody's knocking down the door. Do you want to be a primary or an alternate? Because I think he's
I'll be,
an alternate. So Brian as the,
if there's no one else to.
I've not been there, done that. Okay.
Oh, okay.
okay.
I'm willing to do it.
No, Linda, interested? No? Okay. All right. So I would entertain a motion to appoint Brian as the delegate and Stephanie as the alternate. Would somebody care to make that motion? Can I make
that motion?
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? How about appointing a CISA 2 delegate? You've done that before. Did you enjoy that? Would you be interested in doing that again? Okay, is anybody
Okay, no-
else?
No birthday parties, okay? No birthday, if you're gonna do it.
I don't even remember.
It was yours. No, I don't know.
No, we had a last minute birthday party last year, so.
I think it's Matt.
It was Matt,
That's
yeah.
like the 13th though.
Oh, okay, good.
Okay. Would somebody care to make a motion to appoint Linda as the CISA 2 delegate?
I would
And
make,
we need an alternate.
We do?
Yes,
I would.
yes, we did last time.
That we appoint Linda as the
Okay.
Yep. Primary delegate,
Yep.
whatever. And
I can alternate. That's no
Okay.
problem. I can alternate.
No, it's always an interesting.
Like water.
It is.
Okay,
Okay,
Might have.
we have a motion.
okay, yeah.
We have a second.
I'll second.
We have a second. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? How about appointing the WIA delegate?
Oh, we need to
I thought
appoint a
that was-
board representative to Greater Dane County.
Skipped.
I don't have that one.
No,
Really?
that's, what is it?
WI.
It's number N.
N is appoint board representative to the Greater Dane County School District Governance.
I have N as CISA 2.
Oh, yeah, just in the
I'm
agenda.
sorry.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I
Okay.
didn't add that.
I'm
one in.
following my script.
That was my error, my apologies.
Okay, okay.
You know.
So that's not, is that
Point
supposed
Ian.
to be in there?
It is supposed to be in there.
It is supposed to be in there, yes.
And
Oh,
So-
yeah, I
Okay,
do
okay.
have it.
Does everybody know what that is?
Yes.
The Greater Dane County Consortium. Is anybody interested in being the representative? Brian, I know you were doing it for the advocacy committee for them.
Yeah, but they never reached out to me.
Interesting.
I've
Maybe
not
they
heard
didn't do it.
anything.
Would you be interested in being the representative for it?
I could, yeah. Does anyone else want it before I take it?
We can, do we need an alternate?
Well, I think it's open to
Anyone
anyone.
can go.
What was happening was we were
Showing up.
Right,
showing up.
so that's what I wanted, so this is new on here this year.
Yes.
That's, yeah.
So if we appoint Brian, then we have someone there for sure. If anybody
Right.
else would like to attend, they certainly can.
Right.
But then we have
And
representation.
as the board representative, if I can't make it, I will let the board know, so we get someone else to go.
That sounds good. I
Okay.
I almost always attend as well.
And I would be willing to be the alternate for that.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, I will make a motion. They should give me the side eye. The primary representative at the Greater Dane County School District Governance Consortium, and that's Sue will be the alternate.
Thank you. We have a motion. We have a second. We have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, now that brings us to the WIA annual meeting. It was Rick. Would somebody make a motion for
I
it?
will
to be
make a
Rick?
motion that Rick Hennert be the delegate to the WIAA annual meeting.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes, but I'll take it. Now we're on to the determining the date of the annual meeting. It has been presented as September 28th, 2026. Would somebody care to make that motion?
I'll make a motion that we hold the 2026 budget hearing and annual meeting on September 26th.
28th.
28th, sorry.
2026.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. That brings us to press verification, and they are not here. That brings us to convening into closed session. Would somebody care to make that motion?
Yeah, we'll go into the other room. Yeah.
I'll make a motion to go in.
Do you want to go into 221?
One.
21.
Mhm.
All right, motion to go into closed session?
Oh, I'll make a motion to go in.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
A second.
We have a second. Roll call?
Yes. Berg,
Yes.
Coker,
Yes.
Esser,
Yes.
Lenhart,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Lubbock,
Yes.
and Sar.
Yes.
Thank you. 221. Is that the same one we were in last time?
Yeah. So,
Oh, okay.
it's checked.
Somebody.
Or see why you're taking off? Thank you. Thank you. Is there any further discussion or action related to closed business? Hearing none. Ooh, or debrief of meeting. Yeah, I have two questions. Oh, the downside, remember. And not everybody has to answer. I'm not gonna go around. This is our new, this is quarter 1 monitoring. So we're monitoring board performance, GC3 job description. So if you have something to say, I welcome that. And if not, no worries. Did we stay focused on governance, policy and outcomes, or did we drift into operational details?
I think we drifted a bit because we got into the indicators. A little heavy target. That would be my,
We asked some questions about the reports. We're proud, yeah.
Yep.
Any other thoughts?
it's also hard to stay at a higher level.
Right,
When you're presented with details.
That's with the data, right?
Can I ask a question about that? Is that okay?
Sure.
So I noticed that and I tried to draw it back out to say administration will, bring it back. Is that helpful when I recognize it
Yeah.
and I jump in and say?
Helpful when anybody recognizes
Okay.
it and jumps in.
All right, because we're always trying to make sure we want the best for the district together. So
Yeah.
it's just making that happen.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That feels right for the moving the work forward.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. No other comments? I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.